Right now, imagine you need to send a message to someone 500 miles away. Urgent message, life or death. What do? You write it down, hand it to a guy on a horse, and then you wait. Maybe 3 days, maybe a week, maybe the guy gets robbed halfway there and your urgent message ends up lining somebody's boot. That was the world for basically all of human history. If you wanted to communicate with someone, one of two things had to happen. Either you went to them or you sent something physical in your place. A letter, a messenger, a carrier pigeon if you were feeling dramatic. Armies lost wars because orders arrived too late. Ships sank because nobody on shore knew there was a storm coming. Businesses collapsed, waiting for news that was already 3 weeks old by the time it arrived. The faster you could move information, the more powerful you were. Simple as that. So humanity tried everything. The Romans built relay towers where soldiers would pass flame signals down a chain. Basically, ancient group chat, limited to whatever message you could encode in fire. The Greeks had a system using water clocks and torches that could send pre-agreed messages. China had the Great Wall, partly functioning as a military signal network. You see smoke from one tower, you light your own. Message passed.
It worked. Sort of. The problem was you could only send what the system was designed to send. You couldn't improvise. You couldn't say, actually disregard that last fire, situation changed. Information moved, but slowly and stupidly. Then in 1844, something genuinely weird happened. Samuel Morse sat in front of a machine in Washington, D.C. and tapped out a message to a partner in Baltimore, 40 miles away, and received a reply in seconds. The telegraph had arrived. For the first time in human history, information moved faster than a human being could physically carry it.
People genuinely did not know what to make of this. Newspapers called it sorcery. One senator wanted the government to investigate whether it was spiritualism. It was not spiritualism. It was electricity moving through a wire. The telegraph exploded. Within 20 years, the United States was covered in telegraph lines. By 1866, a cable had been laid across the floor of the Atlantic Ocean, connecting Europe and America. You could send a message from London to New York in minutes. The world got smaller overnight. But here's the thing about wires. They break. They get cut. Ships couldn't use them at all. And the moment you left the network, you were back to the horse and the pigeon. Someone needed to figure out how to send a message without the wire. That someone was not who you think it was.
Meet James Clerk Maxwell, Scottish physicist, enormous beard, absolutely unhinged in the best possible way. In the 1860s, Maxwell sat down and did something that sounds completely insane. He wrote a set of equations that described waves nobody had ever seen, measured, or proven existed. He called them electromagnetic waves, invisible energy that could travel through empty space at the speed of light. The scientific community's response was basically, okay, sure man, cool math. Nobody could test it. Nobody had equipment sensitive enough to detect these supposed invisible waves. Maxwell died in 1879 without ever seeing a single experiment confirm his work. Which is gutting, honestly, because he was completely right.
8 years after Maxwell dies, a German physicist named Heinrich Hertz builds a contraption in his lab, 2 metal rods with a gap between them connected to a power source, and across the room a simple wire loop with another gap. He runs electricity through the rods. A spark jumps the gap. And across the room with nothing connecting the 2 devices, a tiny spark appears in the wire loop. Maxwell's invisible waves, real, right there in a German lab, proven. Hertz publishes his findings, and the world of physics goes absolutely wild. Someone asks him what this discovery could be used for. His answer? Nothing. Hertz genuinely believed his discovery had 0 practical application. He died 6 years later at 36, still convinced he had found something interesting but useless. He was wrong about that part.
Enter Guglielmo Marconi, Italian, 20 years old, no formal scientific training, and completely, obsessively convinced that Hertz's useless discovery could carry messages. Marconi starts experimenting in his parents' attic in Bologna, reading everything Maxwell and Hertz had published, building on the work of a dozen other scientists whose names history mostly forgot, and slowly, methodically extending the range of a wireless signal, first across a room, then across a field, then over a hill. He wasn't the only one working on this. A Russian scientist named Popov was doing similar work at almost exactly the same time. So was an Indian physicist named Jagadish Chandra Bose, who actually demonstrated wireless transmission before Marconi and never got proper credit for it. The truth is, wireless communication wasn't invented by one person. It was assembled from pieces built by a lot of people. And then one guy ran to the patent office faster than the others.
That guy was Marconi. He patents everything he can get his hands on in Britain in 1896, sets up a company, and immediately starts doing something the other scientists weren't doing: marketing. Public demonstrations, government meetings, naval contracts. Marconi understood that in the race between brilliant and famous, famous wins. In 1901, he pulls off what many people called impossible. He transmits a wireless signal from Cornwall in England all the way across the Atlantic to Newfoundland in Canada. Over 3,400 kilometers through the air, no wire,
Scientists said it couldn't work because radio waves travel in straight lines and the Earth is curved. Marconi did it anyway, because the waves bounce off the upper atmosphere, which nobody had quite accounted for yet. The world loses its mind. Marconi is on the front page of every newspaper on Earth. He becomes the face of wireless.
There is one person watching all of this who is absolutely furious. Nikola Tesla, Serbian-American inventor, genius, and catastrophically bad businessman. Tesla had been working on wireless transmission of energy for years. He had actually demonstrated a working system before Marconi filed his patents, and Marconi had almost certainly read Tesla's published work. Tesla files a lawsuit. The US Patent Office goes back and forth for years, at one point actually overturning Marconi's key patent and awarding it to Tesla, then reversing again. It is a legal mess that drags on for decades. Marconi had money and lawyers. Tesla had ideas and, increasingly, not much else.
In 1904, the U.S. Patent Office hands the radio patent to Marconi. The Nobel Prize follows in 1909. Tesla gets nothing. It gets worse. The cable companies, the people who owned all those telegraph lines running under the Atlantic, had been watching wireless technology with growing panic. These were massive, wealthy, politically connected businesses, and they had absolutely no interest in being made obsolete. They lobbied governments. They spread doubt about whether wireless was reliable. They used every tool available to slow down the adoption of technology that threatened their wires. It almost worked. Until the night it very much didn't.
April 14, 1912, the RMS Titanic is 4 days into her maiden voyage. She's carrying over 2,200 people and a wireless room staffed by 2 operators, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride, running a Marconi company system. Throughout the day, multiple ships had been sending ice warnings via wireless. Some of them reached the Titanic's bridge. Some didn't. Phillips was backed up handling passenger messages, personal telegrams people were paying to send to relatives on shore. At 11:40 p.m., the ship hits the iceberg. What happens next is the first major rescue operation in history coordinated by wireless. Phillips starts hammering out distress signals immediately, CQD first, then the newly established SOS. The Carpathia, 93 kilometers away, picks it up and turns around at full speed. The Titanic sinks in 2 hours and 40 minutes. 1,500 people die, but 710 people survive, pulled from the freezing water by the Carpathia because a wireless signal crossed 93 kilometers of dark ocean in seconds. Without wireless, the Carpathia would never have known. Every single person on those lifeboats would have died. The public reaction is immediate and permanent. Overnight, wireless stops being a novelty and becomes a necessity. Every major government passes laws requiring ships to carry wireless equipment and maintain 24-hour listening watches. The cable company's lobbying collapses. Wireless is not going away.
From there, it moves fast. Within a decade, engineers figure out how to transmit voice through wireless. Not just dots and dashes, but actual speech, music, anything. The first proper radio broadcast happens in 1920 out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, station KDKA. Election results. People hear it in their living rooms and cannot believe what is happening. By the late 1920s, radio is everywhere. Millions of sets sold. News, entertainment, government addresses, sports, all of it moving invisibly through the air into homes across the world. The thing that Maxwell described on paper in the 1860s, that Hertz proved in a lab, that Marconi turned into a business, that the Titanic made undeniable, it had become the first mass medium in history.
And it didn't stop there. Radar in World War II, television, mobile phones, Wi-Fi, the signal connecting you right now to the entire internet, it's all descended from the same invisible waves that Heinrich Hertz found bouncing across a German lab in 1887. He thought it was useless. Every revolution has a starting point.